Okay, so we're gonna work on the PTO seal now. In order to get to that, I'm gonna have to remove this housing. It's got 4 bolts here, 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 and here holding it in. There's 9/16. There's a nut on the bottom, flat washer on the top, and a lock washer between the pan and the nut on the bottom. There's the 4 I took off right there, and they weren't hard to get off. Not too much of a fight. Again, they're 9/16, and there's 4 of them holding it on. Should be able to take that right off. Now we got better access to the PTO. I guess I'm gonna spray some degreaser on this, try to clean it up a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so I got it cleaned up a little bit. It's really gommed up with grease, but first thing you want to do is loosen this big nut. Use a pipe wrench like that and take it off. It'd be easier to get it off before you try to take the housing off. I've already loosened it up and it just slides off just like that. That's what holds the packing. There's not an oil seal in here, it's just a rope packing, as I call it. I'll show you what it looks like in a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is loosen these 4 bolts. They're 9/16. I've already loosened them by hand. I'll take the impact gun to them and get them the rest of the way off. Okay, we got those 4 bolts off. There they are right there. And this should slide right off. And there's your bearing inside. Bearing seems to be alright. It rolls really good. Check that. We don't need to replace that bearing. The reason I took this off was because it's going to be much easier to replace that packing. Trying to see if I could get it out. There it is. There's the packing. It's old rope packing. Much easier to replace that with that off. But I got it out. We'll clean this housing up, show you how to put a new one in. Okay, so I got the housing cleaned up pretty good for the PTO. This is the nut. Tightens up against the packing. The threads are a little galled up on the end of it, but it threads on just fine, and I spun it all the way down in there to make sure it'll tighten up. No problems. Looks bad, but it works. There was actually 2 pieces of packing in there. See how compressed that was, where it tied around the threads. Probably why it was leaking a little bit. It was actually leaking a lot. But this is the new one. You're gonna have to cut it. It comes as a long piece. So I'm debating at this point on whether to put 1 in there, try to tighten it down, or go ahead and put 2 back in. I'm leaning more towards putting 2 in. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so what I ended up doing was I've cut 2 pieces off. Razor blade works good. Just be careful. And I've got both of them stacked in there inside the housing. And what I did was the seam, I staggered them. The seam of the first one is at the bottom of the housing. See, this is the top where the adjustment screw is. The seam of the bottom one is at the bottom, and the top one here, I put the seam at the top, so that way if it does try to, the fluid does try to get past it, maybe it'll slow it down a little more. Now, what happens is, I've got it packed in there good and tight. Just push down on it with some needle nose pliers. What happens is, when it goes back on the shaft, this nut goes on. And I don't know if you can see down in there or not, but it tightens up against that packing and holds pressure against it, and that's what stops the fluid from leaking out. Over time they just deteriorate. It's a little different concept. Well, same concept as an oil seal, but it uses pressure to stop it instead of the seal being inside the housing. It's just an older way of doing things. They don't really use them anymore much. So let's bolt it back on the tractor and go from there. Okay, so we're ready to bolt it back on. Don't forget your shims, your metal shims. There's 2 of them here. They're stuck together, but those go first between the housing and the inner housing there. Make sure this adjustment screw is all the way up. You don't want to try to run this nut on with that screw down. It's just going to mess your threads up. So basically what we're going to do is put those shims back on over the bolt holes lined up, and then we'll bolt the housing on. Slide it on just like that. There's a notch at the top, so it'll kind of help keep you lined up. Just like that. I'll thread these bolts in. Get that bolted down, and then we'll put the nut back in. Okay, got the housing back on, got it bolted on. Those are the 4 9/16 bolts, and there's a lock washer under each one. Just tighten them down pretty good, tight, don't wring them off. And I've started this nut back on here and got it as tight as I can, hand tight. Now I'm gonna put the pipe wrench on it, tighten it down. That tightens up against those packings in there. It'll stop that fluid from getting out. PTO shaft still turns like it should, so we haven't messed anything up. Then we can tighten this back down once we get it's like a retaining screw or adjustment screw. Once we get this tightened where we want it, we can tighten this back down. But until then, I like to leave it out, so the bottom of that will gall up your threads as it goes through. Alright, we got her bolted on. We got the screw tightened down with the pipe wrench, and we've tightened our retaining screw back down to hold it in place. PTO shaft still turns. If you tighten it too tight, it'll stop it from turning. I mean, it will once you engage it, but it'll mess the packings up inside. So tight, but not too tight. Okay, so now that we got all that done, all we got to do is put this housing back on, and it simply sits back on there and bolts back down with the 4 9/16 bolts. Okay, so got the housing bolted back down. Again, there's 4 9/16 bolts, nuts and washers on the bottom. Now that guard's back on, and we're ready to move on to something else.